Hey everyone, I'm Peter Stories here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now settle in, get cozy, and let yourself relax. The radio crackled at 6:47 a.m., pulling Ethan Crawford from a sleep that had never quite arrived. His hand found the handset before his eyes fully opened. 12 years of muscle memory, though the last 4 had been different. Slower, more hesitant. Ranger Crawford, this is dispatch. We have a situation at the Hoh River Trail, mile marker 7. School group reporting a missing camper. Ethan sat up, the springs of his bunk protesting. Through the window of the ranger station, the Olympic forest was invisible behind walls of rain. He could hear it hammering the roof, the same relentless percussion that had been falling for 3 days straight. Copy that. Details? 15-year-old female Samantha Chen, last seen at approximately 11 p.m. yesterday. Group leader says she went to use the facilities and never returned. They searched until 2 a.m. before making the call. 8 hours. Ethan's jaw tightened. In this weather, with temperatures dropping to 40 degrees, hypothermia could set in within 3 hours if she was wet. And everyone was wet in the Hoh rainforest. I'm en route. Contact SR and get a team mobilized. He dressed in the dark, each movement practiced. Merino wool base layer, fleece mid layer, Gore-Tex shell. His hands moved to his gear pack automatically. Headlamp with fresh batteries, GPS unit, first aid kit, emergency bivvy, compass, whistle, water purification tablets, emergency rations. The Motorola two-way radio clipped to his belt. His hand hovered over the hunting knife in its sheath, and something cold moved through his chest. 4 years ago, he'd gone into these woods after a missing hiker. He'd found her, but what he'd found with her had cost him 18 months of therapy and a transfer request he'd eventually withdrawn. Dr. Martinez had called it acute stress reaction. Ethan called it knowing better. The thing was, he'd been back to that spot. Mile marker 12 on the Enchanted Valley Trail. The ancient Sitka spruce that had been split by lightning, its blackened core hollow enough to stand inside. He'd taken measurements, photographs, soil samples. He'd found nothing that explained what he'd seen that night. The woman standing inside the tree, her skin the color of rain-soaked bark, her eyes reflecting his flashlight like an animal's, her mouth opening to speak in a language that sounded like wind through needles. The hiker had been catatonic, clutching her knees 15 feet away, hypothermic but alive. She'd never spoken about what happened. Neither had Ethan, not really. Not the parts that mattered. He loaded his pack into the Ranger Service F-250, the diesel engine coughing to life reluctantly in the damp air. The dashboard clock read 7:03. The windshield wipers could barely keep pace with the rain as he headed south on Upper Hoh Road, the forest pressing close on both sides. His radio chirped. Crawford, this is Chief Nakamura. SAR team is 2 hours out, coming from Port Angeles. Weather's delaying the helicopter. Understood. I'm not waiting 2 hours. A pause. Ethan, I need you to wait for backup, protocol. 8 hours missing in 40-degree rain, you know the window. Another pause, longer. Nakamura knew. Everyone knew. Keep your radio on. Check in every 30 minutes. Copy. The trailhead parking area held 2 vehicles. A white Ford Econoline van with Cascade Academy stenciled on the side, and a blue Subaru Outback. Ethan pulled in beside them, killed the engine. The rain was a living thing, not individual drops, but a continuous sheet of gray. A man in a yellow poncho emerged from the van before Ethan could step out. Mid-30s, glasses fogged, moving with the jittery energy of someone who'd been awake all night. Ranger Crawford, I'm Derek Paulson, the trip leader. Thank God you're here. His voice cracked slightly. Ethan grabbed his pack, shouldered it. Tell me exactly what happened. They moved to the covered information kiosk, rain thundering on the wooden roof. Paulson produced a soggy notebook, hands shaking slightly as he flipped pages. We're from Seattle. Environmental science class, 8 students, 2 chaperones. We set up camp at the designated site near Mile 7 around 4 p.m. yesterday. Dinner at 6, campfire program at 7:30. Samantha was there for all of it, participated normally. Around 11, she said she needed to use the bathroom. We have a designated area about 50 yards from camp. She took a flashlight. After 20 minutes, her tent mate Alicia got worried. We searched the immediate area, calling her name. Nothing. He looked up, rain dripping from his hood. We expanded the search for 3 hours. I kept 2 people at camp in case she came back. She never did. Was she upset about anything? Argument with another student? No. She was actually in good spirits. Excited about seeing the Hall of Mosses tomorrow. Today, I mean. Medical conditions? Medications? None listed on her forms. She's a good student, no disciplinary issues, well-liked. Ethan pulled out his own notebook, the pages already damp. I need her exact description. 5'3", approximately 110 pounds. Black hair, shoulder length. She was wearing a blue Columbia rain jacket, black North Face fleece, jeans, Timberland hiking boots. She had her glasses on, she's nearsighted. And she just took a flashlight, no pack? Just the flashlight, a red mag light, 3 D cells. Ethan wrote it down, though he'd already memorized it. Show me the camp. The trail was a river of mud. They passed under massive Sitka spruces, their branches forming a canopy that provided illusory shelter. The rain simply collected and fell in larger, heavier drops. Moss draped everything, transforming the forest into something primordial. Sword ferns crowded the understory, their fronds nearly as tall as Ethan. The sound was overwhelming. Rain on leaves, rain on the river to their left, rain on his hood. It created a white noise that could hide anything. At Mile 7, the designated camping area opened into a small clearing beside the Hoh River. 2 orange tents stood clustered together, 1 sleeping bag visible in each. A tarp had been strung between trees, under which sat a portable stove and cooler. 3 teenagers huddled there, watching Ethan approach with hollow eyes. The other chaperone, a woman in her 50s with a Seattle Seahawks cap, stood nearby. Paulson introduced her as Mrs. Chen, and Ethan felt his stomach drop before the connection registered. She's your daughter. Mrs. Chen's face was stone, but her eyes were red. Yes. I thought bringing her on this trip, showing her what I love about nature. Her voice broke. She turned away. Ethan's radio crackled. Crawford, this is dispatch. SAR team is still 90 minutes out. How copy? He keyed the mic. Copy. Beginning search pattern now. Ethan. Nakamura's voice cut in. You wait for the team. Ethan looked at Mrs. Chen's back, at the teenagers' haunted faces, at the forest surrounding them. He thought about 8 hours, hypothermia, the rain that wouldn't stop. I'll check the immediate area, establish a baseline before SAR arrives. He released the key before Nakamura could argue. Where exactly did she go to use the bathroom? Paulson pointed northeast, away from the river. That direction. We marked the path with glow sticks. The glow sticks were still visible, sickly green in the gray morning. Ethan followed them, his boots squelching in mud. The designated bathroom area was a small depression behind a fallen log, basic privacy, with reasonable distance from camp. He swept his flashlight, unnecessary in the growing daylight, but habit ran deep, across the ground. Her footprints were there, small boot treads in mud leading to the log, and then nothing. The rain had erased whatever came next, turned the ground into formless clay. He widened his circle, moving in a spiral pattern, looking for any sign. A broken branch, disturbed undergrowth, a piece of fabric. The forest gave him nothing but moss and ferns and the endless percussion of rain. Samantha! His voice sounded small against the downpour. Samantha Chen, can you hear me? No response, not that he expected one. 8 hours in this cold if she was unconscious? He pushed the thought away and continued searching, professional discipline overriding the cold weight in his gut. He marked trees with orange flagging tape as he went, creating a grid. Standard search protocol. He'd done this dozens of times, but 4 years ago, on the Enchanted Valley Trail, he'd done this too. Grid search, proper protocol, professional distance. Until the grid led him somewhere, protocol didn't cover. 30 minutes in, he found something. A glow stick, snapped and active, lying in the mud 15 yards beyond the bathroom area. Not part of the marked path. He knelt beside it, examining the ground. No footprints, the rain had seen to that, but the ferns here were disturbed, bent as though something had passed through recently. He stood, oriented himself. Northeast, deeper into the forest, away from the trail and the river, away from where she should have gone. Ethan keyed his radio. Dispatch Crawford, found possible evidence that subject traveled northeast from camp, marking location and continuing. Copy, Crawford. Remember your check-in schedule. He followed the disturbed ferns, flagging trees as he went. The forest grew denser, the canopy thicker. Less rain reached him here, but the ground was soft with centuries of composted needles. His boots sank with each step. Another glow stick, this one nearly buried in moss. Then another, 20 yards farther. Someone had dropped them deliberately, marking a path. But Samantha had only taken a flashlight, unless she'd found these, unless someone else had left them. The cold in Ethan's chest spread to his limbs. He checked his GPS, 478439 degree N, 123.9347 degree on W. He was nearly a quarter mile from camp now, well beyond where a girl simply needing a bathroom would wander. The terrain began to rise, a gentle slope at first, then steeper. His thighs burned as he climbed, using roots and rocks for handholds. The GPS showed him approaching a ridgeline he knew from maps, a spur off Mount Olympus's eastern flank, unnamed and unremarkable except for its position between two watersheds. At the crest, breathing hard, he found the tree. It was enormous, even by Olympic standards. A Sitka spruce that might have been standing when Columbus reached the New World, its trunk 20 feet in diameter, its lowest branches thick as normal trees. But it was wrong somehow. The bark was scarred, not by natural means, not by age or weather or animals. These were clean cuts, recent, the exposed wood still yellow-white beneath. Someone had carved into it. Not names or initials, but symbols. Geometric patterns that Ethan didn't recognize but that made his skin prickle. They covered a section of trunk at chest height, maybe 4 feet wide and 6 feet tall, and beneath the tree, sitting against the roots, a red mag light. 3D cells. Off. "Samantha!" Ethan shouted, spinning, scanning the forest. "Samantha, can you hear me?" Movement to his left. He turned, hand dropping instinctively to the knife at his belt. A Roosevelt elk, a huge male with a 6-point rack, stood 30 feet away. It stared at Ethan with dark eyes, utterly still despite his presence. Elk didn't act like this. They ran. They avoided humans. Ethan froze. The elk continued staring, not aggressive, not afraid, just watching. Then it turned and walked away, not hurried, simply moving northwest along the ridge. After 20 paces, it stopped and looked back. "Jesus Christ," Ethan whispered. But he followed. The elk led him along the ridgeline for 10 minutes, maintaining the same distance, stopping whenever Ethan fell behind. This was impossible. This didn't happen. Elk were prey animals, skittish, their entire evolutionary history built on avoiding predators. But Ethan had seen impossible before. The ridge descended sharply, and the elk disappeared down the slope. Ethan followed more carefully, testing each foothold. The sound of running water grew louder, a creek, swollen with rain, cutting through a small ravine. At the bottom, the elk stood beside something. Even from 15 feet away, even in the gray light, Ethan could see the blue of her rain jacket. He stumbled down the final slope, nearly falling, catching himself against a Douglas fir. "Samantha!" She was wedged between two rocks beside the creek, her body partially in the water, her face turned to the side, not moving. Ethan dropped beside her, fingers finding her throat, a pulse. Faint, but there. Her skin was ice cold, lips blue. advanced hypothermia. He pulled her from the water, laid her flat. Her glasses were gone, her hair plastered to her skull. She was breathing, shallow and slow, but breathing. "Samantha, can you hear me? I'm Ranger Crawford. You're safe." No response. He grabbed his radio. "Dispatch Crawford, I found her. Northeast Ridge, approximately .4 miles from camp. She's alive but critical hypothermia. I need that helicopter now." "Copy, Crawford. Coordinates?" He read them off while pulling the emergency bivvy from his pack. Silver Mylar, rated for sub-freezing. He wrapped her carefully, then added his own fleece jacket, despite the cold immediately cutting through his base layer. "Helicopter is still grounded," dispatch responded. "Weather's too severe. SAR ground team is 45 minutes out. Can you move her?" Ethan looked at the slope he'd descended, at Samantha's condition. Moving her wrong could send her into cardiac arrest. "Negative. Too dangerous. I'll warm her here and wait for SAR." He pulled chemical heat packs from his kit, activated them, placed them against her core and neck. Her breathing remained shallow. He checked her pupils. Sluggish response. This was bad. This was very bad. "Samantha, stay with me. Your mom's waiting. Everyone's waiting." He looked around for the elk. It was gone. But something else was there. At first, he thought it was a person standing on the far side of the creek, obscured by rain. Then his eyes adjusted and he realized it wasn't a person at all. It was part of the tree. A western red cedar, ancient and massive. Its trunk gnarled into a shape that resembled a human form. The rain and shadows created the illusion of a face, 2 knots for eyes, a deep crack for a mouth. Ethan stared at it, unable to look away. The face seemed to shift in his peripheral vision, becoming more defined, more real. The mouth opened wider. No. It was just a tree. Pareidolia, the human brain's tendency to see faces in random patterns. Nothing more. But the face was looking at him. Ethan's hand found his knife, pulled it free. The blade gleamed dully in the gray light. "Stay back." The absurdity of threatening a tree didn't escape him, but neither did the memory of 4 years ago. The woman inside the lightning-struck spruce. The way she'd moved, fluid and wrong, like stop-motion footage. The words she'd spoken that weren't words, just sounds that bypassed his ears and resonated directly in his skull. The cedar's face remained motionless, but Ethan could feel something emanating from it. Not malevolence exactly, more like attention. Focus. The forest's entire awareness concentrated on this spot, on him, on the girl at his feet. "She's just a kid," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "She didn't mean any harm." The face in the cedar didn't respond, but Ethan felt pressure building in his skull, behind his eyes. Like the air before a thunderstorm, that electric tension that made animals restless and humans irritable. Words formed in his mind, not his own. The sacred was violated. Ethan's breath caught. The tree, the one with the carvings. 5 nights passed, metal blades, human hands, the oldest sister wounded. 5 nights ago would have been Friday, before the school group arrived, someone else. She didn't do it. Ethan gestured to Samantha's unconscious form. "She's a kid on a school trip, she just got lost." The young one was called, to witness, to understand the price. Called? Ethan's grip tightened on his knife. "You did this. You let her out here." The pressure in his skull increased, painful now. Colors bloomed at the edges of his vision. "The forest was here before your kind. Will remain after. Some places are not yours. Some things are not to be taken, changed, destroyed for convenience." Ethan's mind reeled. This was happening. This was real. 4 years of telling himself otherwise. 4 years of Dr. Martinez's rational explanations. 4 years of pretending. All of it crumbled. "I get it," he said. "I do. But punishing her won't fix the tree. It won't teach whoever did the carving, it just hurts more people. Your kind does not learn. century after century. Forest becomes farm, becomes town, becomes city. The trees fall, the sacred spaces shrink, until nothing remains. You're right. The admission came easier than Ethan expected. We destroy things. We take too much, but not her. She's 15. She cares about the environment. That's why she's here. Punishing her for someone else's crime isn't justice. Justice. The word echoed in his head with such contempt that Ethan flinched. Your justice is young, shallow. The justice of seasons, of growth and decay, of balance. This you do not comprehend. Then help me comprehend. Ethan lowered his knife slightly. I'm listening. The pressure eased fractionally. Around him, the rain seemed to slow, each drop suspended for a moment before continuing its fall. The sound of the creek softened. The forest held its breath. You have seen before. 4 winters past. You were marked then. The woman in the split tree. She trespassed on the hunting ground of the keeper of the valley. You brought her back, but you understood. You felt the weight of violation. Ethan's throat constricted. I felt something. You respected the boundary after. Never returned to that place. This is wisdom. Rare in your kind. And the girl? Ethan knelt beside Samantha, checking her pulse again. Still there, still fighting. What boundary did she cross? She followed the lights. The path we set for the one who carved the eldest sister. That one did not come. The young one came instead. The forest called, and she answered. Few of your kind still here. This made us curious. We watched. We waited to see if she would show respect or continue in greed like the others. She's hypothermic, Ethan said flatly. She's dying. What did you expect her to do? Survive. Those with true connection to the living world survive. They hear the warnings, see the signs, know when to turn back. She walked deeper. She touched the eldest sister's wounds with bare hands. She took water from the sacred spring without offering. She is not blameless. Ethan's jaw clenched. She's a child who got lost in the woods. No one is lost here. Only those who do not belong. The pressure returned, crushing now. Ethan gasped, dropping to one knee. His vision darkened at the edges. In the center of his fading sight, the face in the cedar moved. The mouth opened wider, the knots that served as eyes deepening to tunnels. From those tunnels, something emerged. It flowed more than walked, a form that hurt to perceive directly. Woman-shaped but wrong, proportions shifting with each movement. Her skin was bark-textured, gray-brown and ridged. Her hair was moss, deep green and alive. Where her feet touched the ground, mushrooms sprouted in rings. She crossed the creek without disturbing the water, glided to where Samantha lay and knelt beside her. Ethan tried to stand to intervene, but his body wouldn't respond. The pressure in his skull had spread to his entire being, pinning him in place. The figure placed one hand on Samantha's forehead. The girl's eyes opened, unfocused, pupils dilated but open. She looked directly at the being above her and didn't scream. The forest is older than memory, the figure said, her voice like wind through branches. It remembers everything, every seed, every death, every moment of growth and decay. You walked through memory tonight, little one. You saw what we preserve, and you wept for the wounded tree. This matters. Samantha's lips moved, but no sound emerged. Your tears fell on sacred bark. This is offering. This is respect. Unknowing, but genuine. The figure's hand moved to Samantha's chest, above her heart. You carry no malice, no greed, only curiosity and sadness for suffering not your own. This is wisdom your elders lack. The figure looked at Ethan, and he felt the full weight of her attention. Centuries of it, millennia. You were marked because you chose mercy over duty when duty demanded violence. The woman would have died in the split tree. You gave her your warmth, your food, your water. You carried her 12 miles, though she was mad with fear and fought you. You did not abandon her when she bit you, when she screamed that you were the monster. This is why you were allowed to leave." Ethan's voice returned. "I'm a ranger. That's my job. Your words say duty, your heart said compassion. We know the difference." She removed her hand from Samantha's chest. "The girl lives. The debt is balanced. But the one who carved the eldest sister, this debt remains open. Find them. Bring them to understand what they damaged, or we will call them as we called this one, and they will not have a protector." "How am I supposed to?" "You are marked. You are known. When you walk our places, we see you. When you need guidance, we provide, as we provided today." She gestured toward the ridge above. "Your elk guide returns to the meadow. Your metal voice summons others of your kind. The young one will survive. You have kept your part. Keep the rest." The pressure vanished. Ethan collapsed forward, catching himself on his hands, gasping. When he looked up, the figure was gone. Just the cedar remained, its knots and cracks forming nothing more than random patterns in bark. His radio crackled. "Crawford, this is Sayar. We're at the camp. Need your exact position." He fumbled for the handset. 20 yards south of your location. Follow my flagging tape. Subject is stable but critical. I have her secured." "Copy. En route." Samantha stirred, a small sound escaping her lips. Her eyes remained closed, but her breathing had strengthened. Ethan checked his watch. He'd lost track of time. 20 minutes? An hour? The light hadn't changed in the thick forest, rain and clouds erasing the sun's movement. He heard voices, saw lights through the trees. The SAR team emerged, 4 men and women in high-vis orange, carrying a rescue litter. They moved with practiced efficiency, checking Samantha's vitals, replacing Ethan's emergency bevy with their own warming equipment, starting an IV line. "Good work finding her," the team leader said, a woman named Rodriguez whom Ethan had worked with before. "Another hour and we'd be doing recovery, not rescue." "She's tough," Ethan replied. They loaded Samantha onto the litter and began the careful trek back to camp. Ethan followed, his legs trembling with exhaustion he hadn't noticed until now. At camp, Mrs. Chen collapsed beside her daughter, tears finally breaking free. An hour later, the helicopter arrived, weather finally allowing flight. They loaded Samantha aboard, Mrs. Chen with her. The Forest Service provided transport for Ethan and the rest of the group back to the trailhead. In his truck alone, Ethan pulled out his notebook. He stared at the blank page, trying to decide what to write in his official report. The facts were simple. Girl wandered from camp, got disoriented, fell into creek, went hypothermic. He found her following basic search protocols. Everything else, the glow sticks, the carved tree, the elk, the figure. How could he write that? Who would believe it? But he'd been given a task. Find the one who carved the eldest sister. If this story is gripping your attention, follow for more quality content. What would you do in Ethan's situation? Share your thoughts. 3 days later, Ethan returned to the ridge. Alone, off duty, carrying only water and his GPS. He found the massive Sitka spruce easily. His flagging tape still marked the route. The carvings were still there, but they'd changed. The cuts had darkened, resin seeping from the wounds like amber blood, and beneath the symbols carved more recently were initials. MH plus KL and a date, 10/3/08. 2 days before the school group arrived. Ethan photographed everything, measured the carvings, collected samples of the resin. Back at the station, he pulled permit records. On October 3rd, 2 overnight permits had been issued for the Hoh River Trail, the school group, and a couple from Seattle. Names, Marcus Holloway and Kelly Lambert. He ran them through the database. Both had previous citations for illegal camping in protected areas. Both had social media accounts filled with photos of themselves at secret spots and hidden gems, always tagged with specific locations despite leave no trace principles. Ethan spent 2 hours on their Instagram feeds. He found it on Kelly Lambert's account, posted October 4th. A photo of the carved tree, Her and Marcus posing in front of their ancient forest art project. The caption read, "Made our mark on something that will last forever." Couples goals, Yarm PNW. Wilderness, adventures 200 likes, 30 comments, all positive. Ethan's hands shook as he drafted the report. Vandalism of protected resources, federal offense. He included screenshots, GPS coordinates, photo evidence. He submitted it through official channels. But that wasn't enough. The figure's words echoed, "Bring them to understand what they damaged." He composed an email, carefully worded, professional. "Ms. Lambert and Mr. Holloway, I'm Ranger Ethan Crawford with Olympic National Park. I'm writing regarding your visit on October 3rd, 2008. I need to speak with you about damages observed on a protected old-growth tree. This is a serious matter with potential federal charges, but I'm hoping to resolve this educationally before involving law enforcement. Please contact me at your earliest convenience." The response came within hours. Kelly Lambert, apologetic and panicked. They'd thought the tree was on national forest land, not parkland. They'd seen other carvings on trees before. They didn't realize it was protected. They'd pay any fine, do community service, whatever it took. Ethan arranged to meet them at the ranger station. When they arrived, mid-20s, expensive outdoor gear, confident smiles now replaced with nervous energy, Ethan had them sit across from his desk. "Do you understand why what you did was harmful?" he asked. Marcus nodded quickly. "We do. We really do. We're so sorry. We've already taken the post down from Instagram." "Tell me why it was harmful." They exchanged glances. Kelly spoke. "Because it's vandalism. It's against the rules. It damages the tree." "How does it damage the tree?" "Well, I mean, we only carved into the bark. We didn't hurt it. Ethan opened a folder on his desk, pulled out a printout. "This is a Sitka spruce approximately 800 years old. When you carve into its bark, you create wounds that weaken its defenses against insects and disease. You compromise its ability to transport nutrients. In a tree this old, in this climate, those wounds may never fully heal. You've permanently scarred something that was standing before the United States existed." Kelly's face paled. "We didn't know." "But you should have." Ethan's voice remained level. "You had permits. You signed paperwork acknowledging park regulations. You've been cited before for violations. This isn't ignorance, this is willful disregard." Marcus leaned forward. "Look, we'll pay the fine. We'll do community service. We'll never do anything like this again. What do you want from us?" "I want you to understand." Ethan stood, walked to his office window. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. The forest dripped and steamed in rare sunshine. There are consequences to treating nature like a playground for your social media feed. Real consequences. He turned back to them. 3 days after you carved that tree, a 15-year-old girl almost died in those woods. She got lost following a path that led to your art project. She saw what you did to that tree and it broke her heart. That's in her statement. This was a lie, but a necessary one. Samantha had no memory of the night. A common effect of severe hypothermia. Kelly's hands flew to her mouth. "Oh my God." She survived, barely. But part of why she wandered so far was because she was upset about seeing that tree carved up. She's an environmental science student. She cares about these places. "We're so sorry," Marcus said, and for the first time Ethan believed he meant it. "Seriously, we had no idea our actions could. We never thought. That's the problem. You didn't think." Ethan sat back down. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to pay the maximum fine, which is $5,000 each. You're going to complete 200 hours of trail maintenance service in this park, and you're going to attend a forest ecology course and pass with a B or better. Do all of that, and I'll recommend the federal prosecutors don't file charges. Fail any part, and you'll have a federal conviction on your record." They agreed immediately, signing the paperwork with shaking hands. After they left, Ethan drove back to the ridge. He approached the carved tree slowly, respectfully. In his pack, he carried something he'd spent 2 days preparing, a wooden plaque, cedar carved by a Kano artist he'd commissioned. It bore no words, just traditional designs that represented healing and protection. He mounted it to a nearby tree, facing the scarred Sitka spruce. An offering, an acknowledgement. "They're going to make it right," he said to the forest. "Or as right as they can. The debt is settled." The wind picked up, moving through the canopy with a sound like whispered words. Ethan couldn't make them out, but he felt approval wash over him. Or perhaps he imagined it. Perhaps this was all elaborate coping mechanism, his traumatized brain creating narrative meaning from random events. But when he turned to leave, the elk was there again. The same one, the 6-point bull. It watched him for a long moment, then turned and walked away into the forest. Ethan followed its path with his eyes until it disappeared among the trees. Then he headed back to his truck, the weight in his chest finally easing for the first time in 4 years. That night he called Dr. Martinez and told her he didn't need any more sessions. She was pleased, said he'd made remarkable progress. He thanked her and meant it, though his reasons weren't what she thought. Some things couldn't be explained in therapy. Some experiences existed outside the framework of diagnosis and treatment. Some forests were older than human understanding, and some debts could only be paid with respect. Ethan Crawford would walk those forests for 17 more years, until his retirement in 2025. He would find dozens of lost hikers, prevent countless accidents, educate thousands of visitors about leave no trace principles. He would become known as the ranger who never lost anyone, who always brought people home. He would tell people it was experience, training, intuition. But sometimes when search and rescue seemed impossible, when the forest was too vast and the person too lost, Ethan would stand still and listen. And sometimes the forest would answer. A sudden clearing in the fog, a path visible where none existed before, an animal leading him exactly where he needed to go. He never spoke about it, never told anyone about being marked, about the face in the cedar, about the debt he'd paid and the agreement he'd kept. Some things were between him and the forest. Some understandings required no words. And late at night, when the rain fell hard on his station roof, he would sometimes hear them. Voices in the wind, words in the creek's rush, a language older than his own. He never understood them fully, but he knew they were there. Watching, waiting, keeping their own balance in ways humans couldn't comprehend. The forest was patient, the forest remembered, and Ranger Ethan Crawford, marked and trusted, walked its paths with the respect that understanding required. Thank you for reading. If you enjoyed this narrative, consider following for more engaging stories. What's your interpretation of what really happened to Samantha that night in the forest? I'd love to read your theories in the comments. Michael Carson's hands trembled as he radioed base for the 3rd time in an hour. 14 hours into the search, and the Hoh rainforest was doing what it did best, swallowing people whole. Dispatch, this is Ranger Carson. Still no sign of the Bennett girl. I'm at mile marker 7 on the Hoh River Trail heading toward the Lewis Meadow Junction. His voice came out hoarse. The rain had stopped an hour ago, but the forest held moisture like a sponge, droplets falling from the canopy in irregular rhythms that sounded almost deliberate. The radio crackled. Copy that, Carson. Search and rescue team is still 2 hours out. Weather's got them grounded in Port Angeles. 2 more hours. Sophia Bennett had already been missing for 36. Michael knew what the statistics said about survival rates after 48 hours, especially for a 19-year-old college student alone in one of the densest temperate rainforests in the continental United States. The Hoh didn't forgive mistakes. He adjusted the shoulder straps of his pack, 70 pounds of gear that included rope, first aid, emergency blanket, flares, and enough provisions for 2 days. His Motorola 2-way radio, standard issue 2011, had maybe 6 hours of battery left. His personal cell phone sat useless in his pocket, no signal for the last 9 miles. The trail ahead narrowed, hemlock and Sitka spruce pressing in from both sides. Moss covered everything, draped from branches like torn curtains, carpeting the ground in spongy layers that could hide a twisted ankle or worse. The dominant green held 1,000 shades, from almost black to luminescent lime where thin sunlight penetrated the canopy. Michael had searched this section 3 times already, standard grid pattern, calling Sophia's name until his throat burned. But something kept pulling him back here, to this particular stretch where the trail forked toward the abandoned Miller Creek shelter. He'd learned not to ignore those instincts 7 years ago. The memory surfaced unbidden. Another missing hiker, another desperate search, another section of Olympic forest where the rules of nature seemed negotiable. He'd found evidence that time, a campsite that shouldn't have existed, belongings arranged in patterns that defied explanation. And he'd heard things, voices in the woods that knew his name, knew things they shouldn't. His partner that day, veteran ranger Tom Hutchins, had heard nothing, seen nothing. The official report called it stress-induced auditory hallucination, brought on by exhaustion and hypothermia. Michael had stopped trying to convince people after that. "Sophia!" His shout absorbed into the moss and disappeared. "Sophia Bennett, if you can hear me, make noise, any noise." The forest answered with dripping water and the distant complaint of a Steller's jay. He checked his GPS unit, a Garmin handheld that placed him at 47.8573 degree and 123.9348 degree, elevation 578 feet. The Lewis Meadow Junction lay 0.3 miles ahead. According to Sophia's roommate, she'd planned to camp near the meadow, study the Roosevelt elk that frequented the area for her biology thesis. But her tent sat empty at the designated campsite, sleeping bag still in its stuff sack, food hung properly in a bear bag. She'd left her journal, 3 days of meticulous field notes ending mid-sentence. The elk seem agitated today. They keep staring toward the old growth section, ears forward, like they're listening to... The entry stopped there. Michael's boots squelched through mud, each step releasing the rich smell of decomposition and growth that defined the rainforest. The temperature hovered around 52 degrees, cool enough to cause hypothermia if Sophia was wet, warm enough that she could survive if she'd found shelter. "If. I'm coming for you," he said quietly, to the forest or to Sophia, or to whatever part of himself still believed he could save people. "Just hold on." The trail opened into a small clearing where a massive Sitka spruce had fallen decades ago, its nurse log now hosting an entire ecosystem of ferns, seedlings, and fungi. Michael had passed this landmark twice before. He started to skirt around it when he noticed something that hadn't been there an hour ago. A single boot print in the mud beside the log. Fresh. Size women's 7. The tread pattern matching the Merrill hiking boots Sophia's roommate had described. Michael's pulse quickened. He keyed his radio. "Dispatch, I've got a fresh track heading northeast from the fallen spruce at Lewis Meadow approach." Static then. "Copy. That's off-trail territory, Carson. Old growth section. Be careful." The old growth. Where the largest trees in the park stood, some over 500 years old. Where the forest floor remained in perpetual twilight even at noon. Where Sophia's journal said the elk had been staring. Where Michael had heard the voices 7 years ago. He followed the boot prints away from the established trail, pushing through sword ferns that reached his waist. The canopy closed overhead, reducing the light to a green-tinted gloom. The prints led him deeper, impossibly straight, as if Sophia had been walking with absolute purpose toward something specific, or being led. "Sophia," he called. "I'm a park ranger. I'm here to help you." The words seemed to fall dead at his feet. After 20 minutes of tracking, Michael found the second sign, a water bottle half full, propped carefully against a nurse log. A Nalgene bottle, blue, with University of Washington stickers. He picked it up, examining it. No signs of struggle, no indication it had been dropped. It looked placed, deliberate, like a marker. The boot prints continued beyond the water bottle, leading toward a section of forest Michael knew from the maps but had rarely visited, an area the old-timers called the Cathedral, where the largest spruces created something like a natural temple. The light changed as he approached, becoming diffuse and strange, filtering through layers of moss and branch until it seemed to emanate from the vegetation itself rather than the sky. And then he heard it. Michael, his name, spoken in a woman's voice, distant but clear. Not Sophia's voice. This one belonged to someone he'd been trying not to think about for 7 years. Sarah Jennings, the hiker he'd failed to save. Michael froze, his hand instinctively moving to the can of bear spray on his hip. His rational mind cataloged explanations: auditory hallucination, stress, exhaustion, the forest playing tricks with acoustic properties. But his body knew better. His body remembered this feeling, the sensation of the air becoming thick, almost resistant, as if reality itself had grown viscous. "Michael, I've been waiting." The voice came from ahead, from the direction of the cathedral. He could see the massive trees now, their trunks so wide it would take 4 people to encircle them. Between them, the understory opened into something like a chamber, carpeted in moss so thick it looked like green velvet. "You're not real," Michael said to the forest. His voice sounded childish to his own ears. "You're not Sarah." Laughter, soft and sad. "Does it matter? You never found me, Michael. You looked and looked, but you never found me. Just like you won't find her." "Where's Sophia?" He started moving again, following the tracks, the voice, the terrible pull that felt like gravity. "Where is she?" "She's listening, just like I listened. The forest has so much to say, Michael. You just have to be willing to hear it." The cathedral opened before him. A circular clearing perhaps 50 feet across, dominated by 7 ancient Sitka spruces, arranged in an almost perfect ring. The light here was different, wrong somehow, too green and too still. The air felt dense, heavy with moisture and something else. Something that made Michael's skin crawl with a sensation that wasn't quite temperature and wasn't quite touch. In the center of the clearing stood Sophia Bennett. She had her back to him, head tilted at an odd angle, perfectly motionless. She wore the described clothing: gray fleece, green rain jacket, those Merrill boots. Her blonde hair hung in wet tangles down her back. She stood in a posture that seemed both relaxed and rigid, like a puppet with slack strings. "Sophia." Michael's training kicked in. He approached carefully, scanning for injuries, threats, any indication of what had happened. "Sophia, my name is Michael Carson. I'm a park ranger. Everyone's been looking for you. Are you hurt?" She didn't respond, didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge his presence in any way. Michael circled around to face her, hand still on his bear spray. When he saw her face, something cold and deep settled into his stomach. Her eyes were open but unfocused, pupils dilated despite the dim light. Her skin had taken on a grayish cast, her lips slightly parted. She was breathing. He could see the shallow rise and fall of her chest, but everything else about her screamed wrong. "Sophia, can you hear me?" He waved a hand in front of her face. No reaction, no blink, no shift of focus. "I need you to respond if you can understand me." Nothing. Michael grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, I found her. I found Sophia Bennett. I'm in the old growth section, approximately half a mile northeast of Lewis Meadow Junction. I need immediate medical evac. She's..." He paused, searching for the right words. "She's unresponsive. Possible hypothermia, possible shock, possibly..." The radio died in his hand. Not gradually, not with warning static. It simply went silent, mid-transmission, the LED display fading to black. No, no, no. Michael shook it, checked the battery. Full charge. He tried the power button. Nothing. Dead as stone. "She can't leave yet," said a voice behind him. Michael spun around. Empty clearing. 7 ancient trees. Moss and ferns and that wrong green light. "She's listening, Michael. Just like Sarah listened. Just like you're going to listen." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. It sounded like Sarah, but also didn't. Her tone, her cadence, but underneath it something else, something that vibrated at a frequency that made Michael's teeth ache. "What are you?" he demanded, pulling the bear spray free. "What do you want?" "Want?" The laugh came from his left, but when he turned, nothing. "I don't want, Michael, I am." I've been here longer than the trees, feeding on what feeds the trees. Decay and growth, death and life, the beautiful cycle. Let her go. I already have her. I've had her since she entered the cathedral 2 days ago. So eager, so curious. She heard the elk and followed their fear right to me. They know, you see. The animals always know. If this story is capturing your attention, follow for more quality content. What would you do in Michael's situation? Share your thoughts. Michael moved to Sophia, gripped her shoulders. Her skin felt wrong under his hands. Not cold exactly, but absent of heat, as if temperature itself had become irrelevant to her body. Sophia, fight it. Whatever this is, fight it. Her mouth opened slowly, mechanically. When she spoke, it was in her own voice, but the words belonged to something else. It doesn't hurt, Ranger Carson. It feels like finally understanding. Like everything makes sense now. That's not you talking, isn't it? Sophia's eyes finally focused, meeting his, and in their depths Michael saw something that made him want to run. Not terror, but acceptance, almost peace. I came here to study life cycles, death feeding new growth, the forest as a single organism. And now I understand. Now I'm part of it. You're a 19-year-old girl with a family who loves you. You have a roommate who's worried sick. You have a whole life ahead of you. Had, Sophia said, and smiled. Past tense, Michael. I had those things. Now I have something better. Now I have purpose. Michael pulled her forcibly, trying to drag her toward the trail. She didn't resist, but her feet wouldn't move. They stayed rooted to that spot as if she'd grown there, as if her boots had sent down roots into the moss. You can't take her, the voice said, closer now. She's mine. She offered herself freely when she came looking. Just like Sarah did, just like you will. I'm leaving with her. Michael reached for his knife, the fixed-blade Gerber he carried for emergencies. I don't care what you are. I'm not losing another one. Another one. The voice took on a mocking tone. Tell me, Michael, did you ever really believe Sarah was a hallucination? Did you ever really convince yourself that what you heard, what you saw, wasn't real? Michael's hand froze on the knife. 7 years of therapy, of reassurance from supervisors and counselors, of learning to trust the official explanation. It all crumbled in an instant. No, he whispered. I never believed it. Then you know what I am. You know what I do. I am the hunger beneath the growth, the emptiness that allows filling. I take, Michael, I consume, and I've been so very hungry. The clearing darkened, though the sun hadn't moved. The moss on the ancient spruces began to glow with a faint bioluminescence, not visible in direct focus but apparent in peripheral vision, creating the impression that the trees themselves were watching. Sophia's family, Michael started, will mourn, will search, will eventually accept, as all families do. But you, Michael, you're different. You know I'm real. You could tell people, couldn't you? You could warn them. You could bring scientists, investigators, those who might find ways to harm me. Michael's training screamed at him to run, to get help, to mark the location and return with resources. But his instinct, that same instinct that had kept him searching all these years, that had pulled him back to this spot over and over, told him a different truth. If he left now, Sophia would be gone before he returned. Not dead, but lost in whatever state Sarah had entered, whatever transformation the entity offered, and he would spend the rest of his life knowing he'd had a chance, and ran. What do you want from me? He asked. A choice. The voice coalesced, no longer coming from everywhere but from directly in front of him. The air shimmered, and for a moment Michael saw something. A suggestion of form, massive and ancient, made of shadow and moss and the slow patience of decay. You can walk away. Leave Sophia. Tell your supervisors you found nothing. Live your life knowing you saved yourself. Or you stay. You listen, as Sophia listened. You join the cycle, Michael. You understand what few humans ever comprehend, that you were never separate from the forest. You've always been part of it. I'm simply offering to make that connection conscious, eternal. Sophia's hand moved, reaching toward him. Her fingers were cold when they brushed his wrist. "It's beautiful here, Michael," she said, and her voice held genuine wonder. "You can feel everything, every root, every drop of water, every breath of every living thing. You're not alone anymore. You're never alone." Michael looked at her face, young, transformed, lost, and saw Sarah's face superimposed over it. 7 years of guilt, of wondering if he could have saved her if he'd just tried harder, pushed deeper, believed in the impossible. He pulled his hand away from Sophia's grasp. "No," he said firmly. "I'm taking her home." The clearing went silent. Even the ambient dripping of water stopped. Then the entity laughed, and it was the saddest sound Michael had ever heard. "You think you have a choice," it said. "But you walked into the cathedral, Michael, just like Sarah, just like Sophia. The moment you crossed the threshold, you started listening. Can't you feel it? The heaviness in your limbs, the way your thoughts are starting to slow, to expand, to touch roots and stone?" Michael's legs felt weak. He'd attributed it to exhaustion, to 14 hours of hiking, but now he recognized the truth. The numbness spreading up from his feet wasn't fatigue. It was something else, something seeping through his boots, through skin, into blood. He staggered backward, breaking contact with the moss-covered ground, stumbling onto a patch of bare stone. The sensation lessened, but didn't disappear. "You can't save her without saving yourself first," the entity continued. "And you can't save yourself if you stay. So what will it be, Michael Carson? Righteousness or survival? The hero or the coward?" Michael's mind raced. His training provided no protocol for this. His radio was dead. His GPS might still work, but calling in a location meant explaining what happened and who would believe him. Who had believed him 7 years ago? Then he remembered something from Sophia's journal. The elk. The way they'd been agitated, staring toward this section of forest. Animals always know. "Sophia," he said urgently, "your research, the elk. You wrote that they were afraid, staring this direction. They know something's wrong here, don't they?" For the first time, confusion crossed Sophia's face. "The elk," she repeated slowly. "Yes, they wouldn't come close. They kept their distance even from the best grazing. Because this place is sick," Michael pressed. "Because whatever's here isn't part of the natural cycle, it's a parasite. It doesn't give back to the forest. It only takes. The elk know. The birds know. Every healthy thing in this forest avoids the cathedral." "Clever," the entity said, but its voice had lost some confidence. "But understanding doesn't equal escape. You're still here. You're still listening." Michael reached into his pack, fingers closing around a road flare. Standard emergency equipment. He'd carried one for 12 years and never used it. Until now. "Sophia," he said, "I need you to close your eyes." "Michael, trust me." He met her confused gaze. "Trust the part of you that came here to study life, not become part of death. Close your eyes." She did, slowly. Michael struck the flare. It ignited with a sharp hiss, blazing red-orange in the green twilight of the cathedral. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The bioluminescent glow from the moss vanished. The oppressive weight in the air lifted and the entity screamed. It wasn't a sound so much as a sensation, pressure releasing all at once like ears popping during descent. The 7 ancient spruces groaned, their branches shaking, dropping sheets of moss that fell like shed skin. "Light," Michael said, understanding. "Pure, bright, artificial light. You've adapted to the forest's filtered green, to the eternal twilight. But this..." He held the flare higher, turning in a circle. "This you can't tolerate." Sophia gasped, her body convulsing. Her eyes flew open, and for the first time in the cathedral, They looked truly human. Terrified, confused, aware. "Michael?" Her voice was her own, small and lost. "What? Where am I?" "We're leaving. Now." He grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the path he'd entered by. She stumbled, weak, but her feet moved. The roots had released. Behind them, the entity raged. Trees creaked. The ground itself seemed to shudder. But Michael kept the flare between them and the cathedral, kept moving, kept dragging Sophia through sword ferns and over nurse logs, back toward the established trail. "You can't burn the whole forest." The voice followed them, fainter now, diminished. "I'll still be here, waiting, hungry." "Maybe," Michael called back. "But you won't have us." They broke onto the Ho River Trail as the flare sputtered and died. Sophia collapsed against him, sobbing, shaking, alive. Michael's radio crackled to life in his pack. "Carson, this is dispatch. You cut out. Repeat your last. Have you found the Bennett girl?" He pulled out the radio, stared at it for a moment, then keyed the mic. "Dispatch, this is Carson. I have Sophia Bennett. She's alive. Heading back to Trailhead. Recommend we close the old growth section northeast of Lewis Meadow Junction. Permanently. Copy that. Can you provide reason for closure recommendation?" Michael looked back toward the cathedral, hidden now behind layers of green. He thought about official reports and credible explanations. He thought about 7 years of being called crazy. Then he looked at Sophia, at her gray skin slowly gaining color, at her eyes that were beginning to focus on the real world again. "Unstable ground conditions," he said. "Danger to hikers. Trust me on this one." A pause, then, "Acknowledged. Medics are standing by at Trailhead. Good work, Carson." Michael supported Sophia as they walked, her arm across his shoulders, his around her waist. She didn't speak for the first mile, just breathed and cried and occasionally looked back over her shoulder. Finally, as they reached the junction where the trail widened, she said, "What was that?" "I don't know," Michael admitted. "Something old. Something that shouldn't exist but does." "Did you hear it? The voice?" "Yes." "Did you hear?" She stopped walking, forcing him to stop too. Her eyes were sharp now, focused. "Did you hear it use your own voice?" Michael went cold. He'd been so focused on getting them out, on the flare, on moving, that he hadn't processed what happened in those final moments. But now the memory surfaced. The entity's last attempt to hold him. The words spoken in a voice that wasn't Sarah's or Sophia's. His own voice calling his own name, begging himself to stay. "Yes," he said quietly. Sophia nodded, understanding passing between them. The understanding of people who'd seen something impossible and survived it. They walked the rest of the way in silence. The medics met them at the trailhead, wrapping Sophia in thermal blankets, checking her vitals, asking questions she answered in monosyllables. Her parents arrived 40 minutes later, her mother's wail of relief echoing across the parking lot. Michael gave his report to the shift supervisor, sticking to facts. Found her in the old growth section, unresponsive but mobile, possible exposure, possible shock, no visible injuries. He filed the paperwork for the trail closure recommendation, citing safety concerns. No one questioned him. No one suggested stress-induced hallucination. But as he drove home that night, exhausted and empty, his phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello? Michael?" Sophia's voice quiet and scared. "I know you're going to think I'm crazy, but I have to tell someone. I can still hear it. Not as loud, not constant, but it's there, in the back of my mind, whispering." Michael's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He pulled over, unable to drive, and faced this truth simultaneously. "How long?" he asked. "Since we left the cathedral. It's like it left something behind. Part of itself, or maybe part of me stayed there. I don't know. Michael, am I losing my mind?" He thought about Sarah, about whether she'd felt this too in her final days, about whether the entity had ever really let anyone go, or just extended its reach beyond the forest. "No," he lied. "You're in shock, it'll fade." Give it time. But he knew the truth. They both did. You could leave the cathedral, but the cathedral never entirely left you. After they hung up, Michael sat in his truck for a long time, staring at the dark road ahead. His radio dispatch would want a full debriefing tomorrow. Sophia's family would want answers. The Park Service would want to understand what happened. And in the back of his mind, so faint he could almost convince himself it was imagination, he heard a voice. Not Sarah's, not Sophia's, his own, welcoming himself home. Thank you for reading to the end. If you enjoyed this narrative, consider following for more immersive stories. What's your interpretation about the true nature of the cathedral entity? I'd love to read your theories in the comments. The rain had stopped 3 hours ago, but the forest held water like a sponge holds memory. Michael Carson's boots squelched through moss that hadn't been dry in decades, each step releasing the smell of decomposition and rebirth that defined the Hoh rainforest. 14 hours into the search for Sophia Bennett, and the only thing he'd found was the growing certainty that something was fundamentally wrong with this place today. His Motorola radio crackled. "Ranger Carson, this is base. Any updates on your position?" Michael pressed the talk button, watching his breath form clouds in the October air. Still on the Miller Creek Trail, about 2 miles past the junction. Following what might be boot prints, but the ground's too saturated to be sure. Copy that. Weather Service says another system moves in after nightfall. We need you back before then. He didn't respond immediately. Through the cathedral of Sitka spruce and western hemlock, the afternoon light filtered green and uncertain. The forest here grew so dense that GPS signals stuttered, and the canopy trapped mist like a living thing. Michael had worked Olympic National Park for 12 years, 7 of them trying to forget what happened on Mount Storm King. But he'd never felt the rainforest quite like this. Alert. Expectant. "Understood," he finally said. "But I'm not leaving without something concrete. The Bennett family deserves more than we tried." The radio went silent. They knew better than to argue with him about abandoned searches. Everyone at the ranger station knew about Michael's reputation. The one who stayed too long, looked too hard, saw things that weren't there. That's what they'd written in the incident report 7 years ago anyway. Dehydration-induced hallucinations. Trauma response. Recommendation for mandatory psychological evaluation. He'd passed the evaluation. He'd learned to keep certain observations to himself. Michael knelt beside what he'd been tracking, a partial impression in the mud that could have been anything. His knees soaked through immediately. The official search grid had already covered this area twice, but Sophia Bennett's disappearance didn't fit the normal patterns. Experienced hikers didn't vanish from well-marked trails in good weather. Her tent had been found intact, sleeping bag still zipped, water filter sitting beside a full Nalgene bottle. She'd left everything except her day pack and her life. The temperature dropped suddenly, noticeably. Michael's field thermometer read 48 degrees, but his exhale looked like January. He stood scanning the understory of ferns and fallen logs. The forest had gone quiet in a way that made his stomach tighten. Not the natural silence of dusk, but something expectant. Waiting. "Sophia." His voice barely penetrated the density. "Sophia Bennett, if you can hear me, make any sound. We're here to help." The mist moved wrong. Not drifting with air currents, but flowing with intention through the gaps between trees. Michael had spent enough time in these woods to know how fog behaved. This wasn't that. His satellite phone, a personal purchase after the Park Service refused to issue them, showed no signal. Neither did his cell. He was 3 miles from the nearest road, surrounded by trees that predated European contact with the Americas, in a forest that received 12 feet of rain annually, and felt like it was holding its breath. The first time he heard her voice, Michael convinced himself it was wind through branches. "Help me." Faint. Female. Coming from deeper in the forest, off-trail where the vegetation grew so thick that even experienced rangers rarely penetrated it, he marked his position with orange flagging tape and pushed into the undergrowth, his radio now producing only static. The Hoh rainforest wasn't just dense, it was primordial. Club moss hung from branches in curtains, Nurse logs the size of cars decompose slowly into the next generation of trees. Every surface dripped. Every shadow held layers of shadows beneath it. Michael's headlamp barely cut 15 feet through the green darkness. "Help me, please." Closer now. Definitely female. Definitely distressed. Michael picked up his pace, his pulse elevating with the kind of hope that could break a searcher. Finding someone alive after 36 hours in these conditions would be remarkable. Finding them coherent would be miraculous. "Sophia, keep talking. I'm coming to you." "Here. I'm here." The voice came from ahead and to the left. Michael adjusted course, stepping over a rotting log that crumbled under his weight. The forest smelled strongly of decay here, not just the normal decomposition of organic matter, but something older, heavier. His headlamp caught something white through the ferns. Fabric. Michael crashed through the undergrowth with renewed urgency. "Sophia, I can see you. Stay where you are." But when he reached the white object, his hands closed around a torn piece of tent material. Old, weathered, certainly not from Sophia's campsite. The fabric disintegrated as he touched it, falling apart like paper in water. "Why did you stop?" The voice came from behind him now. Michael spun, his headlamp sweeping across moss-covered trunks and hanging lichen. Nothing. No one. His heart rate spiked in a way that had nothing to do with exertion. "Sophia?" His voice sounded smaller than he intended. "Where are you?" "I'm right here, Michael." She knew his name. That made sense. She could have heard it on his radio transmission. But the voice sounded closer than possible. Intimate, like someone standing just behind his shoulder. Michael turned slowly, playing his light across every angle. The forest pressed in around him, living walls of green and brown and shadow. His radio suddenly crackled with a burst of white noise so loud he ripped it from his belt. "Carson, copy. Base, I've got interference. Say again?" "Signal, degrading, return." Then nothing but static. Michael adjusted the frequency, but every channel produced the same meaningless hiss. He was alone in the forest with failing equipment and a voice that shouldn't be there. The rational part of his brain, the part that had gotten him through the psychological evaluation, offered explanations. Acoustic tricks of the forest, another searcher calling out, the beginning of hypothermia affecting his perception. But the older part of his brain, the part that had watched shadows move independently on Mount Storm King 7 years ago, recognized something else. Recognition. "I need you to stay calm, Sophia," he said to the forest at large. "I'm Ranger Michael Carson. I'm here to bring you home. Your parents are worried sick. Can you tell me if you're injured? Come find me, Michael." The voice was definitely moving now, leading him deeper into the undergrowth. Michael hesitated, his training warring with his instinct. Protocol said to mark his position, radio for backup, establish a safe corridor. But protocol also said people died in the first 48 hours. Sophia Bennett had already been out here for 36. He followed the voice. The forest changed as he walked. Subtly at first, a shift in the quality of shadows, a thickness to the mist that seemed to muffle his footsteps. Then more dramatically, the trees grew taller, older, their trunks wider than his outstretched arms. He passed through groves of ancient giants that hadn't been logged because they stood too far from any road. Here, the forest had never been cleared, never been managed, never been touched by anything except time and rain and whatever else lived in the spaces between trees. "I'm tired, Michael." "I know you are. Just keep talking to me. How long have you been walking?" "I don't remember. It feels like forever." Michael checked his GPS, still no signal. His compass spun lazily, unable to settle on magnetic north. According to his watch, it was 4:47 p.m., but the light filtering through the canopy felt wrong for the time. Too dim, too green. "Can you see any landmarks? Anything distinctive?" "Everything looks the same. Trees and mist and more trees. I think I'm going in circles." That matched the profile of a lost hiker. Disorientation, repetitive movement, deteriorating mental state. but her voice sounded too clear, too present, not the hoarse whisper of someone who'd been shouting for help. "Sophia, I need you to stop moving and stay in one place. I'll come to you. Do you understand?" I tried that. It didn't help. "What do you mean?" "The forest doesn't like it when you stop." Michael's skin prickled. That wasn't the kind of statement that came from simple disorientation. He'd extracted dozens of lost hikers over the years, and they all shared certain characteristics: fear, relief at being found, physical exhaustion. They didn't make statements about the forest having preferences. "Sophia, listen to me carefully. Are you alone?" Silence. Long enough that Michael thought he'd lost contact with her entirely. Then, "I don't know anymore." The mist thickened dramatically, reducing visibility to less than 10 feet. Michael's headlamp became almost useless, the beam diffusing into general luminescence that showed him nothing. He pulled out his backup flashlight, a heavy mag light that his father had given him when he first joined the Park Service. The old man had been a ranger too before Olympic, before the rules changed and everything became about liability and documentation. "Stay alert out there," his father had told him the day he left for Washington. "The old forests remember things. They don't always like visitors." Michael had laughed it off as superstition. That was before Mount Storm King, before the incident report that everyone assured him had been caused by dehydration and altitude sickness and stress. "Michael?" The voice again, but different now. Not ahead, not behind, everywhere and nowhere. "Can you help me? That's what I'm trying to do. Can you?" He stopped mid-sentence. Through the mist, illuminated by his flashlight beam, something moved, human-shaped, the right height for a 19-year-old woman. Michael's relief lasted exactly as long as it took his light to fully resolve what he was seeing. The figure stood motionless between two enormous spruce trees, facing away from him. The proportions were wrong, arms too long, posture too rigid, and it was silent in a way that living things weren't. No breathing, no shifting weight, no response to his light. "Sophia?" The figure didn't turn, didn't acknowledge him. But when Michael took a step forward, it moved deeper into the mist with a gliding motion that human legs couldn't reproduce. Every instinct Michael possessed screamed at him to stop following, to mark his position and retreat to the main trail, to radio for backup even though his radio produced only static, to do anything except walk deeper into this ancient forest toward something that might not be Sophia Bennett at all. But what if it was? What if she was so hypothermic, so disoriented that she couldn't recognize help when it arrived? What if he turned back now, and she died alone in these woods because he'd been too afraid to trust his training? If this story is holding your attention, follow for more quality content. What would you do in Michael's situation? Share your thoughts below. Michael kept walking. The figure stayed just at the edge of his light, visible but indistinct. Sometimes it seemed to be moving through the trees. Sometimes it seemed to be part of them. Michael's rational mind offered explanations, missed patterns, visual distortions, his own exhausted perception making connections that didn't exist. But his body knew better. His pulse hammered, his mouth went dry. His legs wanted to run in the opposite direction. "Sophia, if that's you, I need you to stop. I need to see you clearly." The figure stopped. Michael's relief was short-lived. It stood between two massive trees in a small clearing where the canopy opened just enough to let in the dying daylight. As Michael approached, details resolved that made his stomach turn. The clothes were right: blue jacket, gray pants, hiking boots. The hair was right, dark shoulder length pulled back in a ponytail. But the stillness was absolute, inhuman. And when Michael got close enough to reach out, close enough to touch a shoulder and turn the figure around, he saw that it cast no shadow despite his flashlight beam hitting it directly. "Sophia?" The figure turned its head, not the normal rotation of neck and shoulders, but a smooth mechanical pivot that continued further than human anatomy allowed. When it faced him fully, Michael stumbled backward. It had Sophia's face. Not similar, identical, photographically perfect. But the expression was wrong, too neutral, too blank, like a mask rendered by someone who understood how faces looked but not how they moved. "Why did you stop?" It spoke with Sophia's voice, but the mouth didn't quite sync with the words. "Don't you want to help me?" Michael's training evaporated. This wasn't hypothermia. This wasn't disorientation. This was something else entirely, and his body recognized it on a level that bypassed rational thought. He backed away slowly, keeping his light on the figure. "You're not Sophia Bennett." The figure tilted its head with that same unnatural smoothness. "How do you know? You've never seen her before today. You've only seen photographs. Aren't photographs just images? Copies of something real?" Michael's hand found the emergency whistle on his vest. 3 sharp blasts, the universal distress signal. The sound died immediately in the mist, muffled by something more than just atmospheric conditions. "What are you?" "I'm exactly what you're looking for." The figure smiled, and the expression looked wrong on Sophia's face. Too wide, too knowing. "I'm the missing person. I'm the search that never ends. I'm every voice in the forest calling for help." The temperature plummeted. Michael's breath came out in thick clouds. Frost formed on the ferns around him, spreading outward from the figure like an infection. His flashlight flickered. "Where is Sophia Bennett?" "Where she's always been, where they all are." The figure gestured deeper into the forest. "We keep them. They help us call for others. Would you like to see?" Michael's radio suddenly burst to life with deafening volume. "Carson, respond immediately." But the voice wasn't from base. It was his own voice, recorded and played back through electronic distortion. "Something's wrong here." His voice from 7 years ago, on Mount Storm King, when he'd radioed for emergency evacuation and no one believed what he reported. The voice logs from that incident had been sealed in his personnel file. No one was supposed to have access to them. "It's watching me." The figure with Sophia's face laughed, and the sound came from everywhere at once. From the trees, from the mist, from Michael's own radio. "You remember," it said. "You're one of the few who does. Most people forget. They convince themselves it was dehydration, exhaustion, stress. But you remember what you saw up there. You remember what touched you." Michael did remember. The shadow on Mount Storm King that had moved against the light. The voice that had whispered his full name, first, middle, and last. Despite him being completely alone, the overwhelming certainty that something vast and patient had noticed him, had considered him, had ultimately decided to let him leave. The incident report had been filed. The mandatory evaluation had been passed, and Michael had spent 7 years telling himself that everyone else was right, that it had been dehydration, exhaustion, stress. He'd almost believed it. "You're not Sophia," he said again, forcing his voice steady. "And you don't have her. If you did, you wouldn't need to wear her face." The figure's smile faltered. Just slightly. Just enough. "But I do have her," it said, less certain now. "I have her voice. I have her image. I have everything she left in the forest. You have what she's given you, nothing more." Michael didn't know where the certainty came from. Maybe from 7 years of telling himself that the impossible hadn't happened. Maybe from the quiet understanding that some things in old forests existed without requiring permission or explanation. Maybe from the simple fact that if this thing truly had Sophia Bennett, it wouldn't still be trying to lure him deeper. The figure flickered. For a moment, Michael saw through it. Layers of other faces, other bodies, other missing persons that the forest had called for and never released. Dozens of them. Hundreds, maybe. Impressions pressed into the fabric of this place like photographs burned into film. "She's still alive," Michael said. "That's why you can't use her completely. That's why you need me to find her for you." The forest erupted with sound. Not Sophia's voice this time. Every voice. Men and women and children all calling out in distress, all begging for help in overlapping desperation. Michael's radio screamed with interference. His flashlight strobed. The mist pressed in from all sides, cold and viscous and wrong. And through it all, underneath the cacophony, he heard something new. A real voice. Hoarse, weak, terrified, but undeniably human. "Help! Please! Anyone!" It came from his left, away from the figure, away from the path it had been leading him. Michael made a choice that his training would have condemned as reckless, and his instinct recognized as the only option that mattered. He ran toward the real voice, leaving the figure and its stolen faces behind. The forest fought him. Branches appeared out of nowhere, catching his vest, his pants, his skin. The ground became treacherous, mud and roots conspiring to trip him. His radio continued its electronic screaming, and behind him, impossibly close, he heard footsteps that didn't sound like feet. "Anyone? I'm here. Please." Sophia's real voice led him through the densest part of the undergrowth, through sections of forest that looked untouched by human presence. His flashlight caught glimpses of things that shouldn't exist. Trees grown into impossible configurations, rocks that seemed to shift position when not directly observed, patches of luminescent fungi that pulsed with organic rhythm. Then he saw her. Actually her. Sophia Bennett, 19 years old, curled against the base of an enormous Sitka spruce in a small hollow between root structures. She was hypothermic, exhausted, and terrified. But she was alive. Real. Solid. "Sophia!" Michael crashed down beside her, already pulling the emergency blanket from his pack. "I've got you. You're safe now. I'm Ranger Michael Carson, and I'm taking you home." She looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much. "It used my voice," she whispered. "I heard myself calling for help, but I knew I wasn't making the sounds. It was learning me, copying me, trying to become me. I know, but it couldn't. You're still here." Michael wrapped her in the thermal blanket and activated his emergency GPS beacon, the one piece of equipment that seemed to work, despite the interference. The signal would take time to reach anyone, but it was a start. "Can you walk?" he asked. "I think so. But Michael..." She grabbed his arm with trembling fingers. "It doesn't want us to leave." The mist around them thickened impossibly, becoming almost solid. Michael's compass spun wildly. His flashlight dimmed to a dull glow, and from every direction he heard voices calling out. His mother, his father, his ex-wife, his old training officer. Every person who'd ever mattered to him, all begging him to stay, to help, to come find them. "Don't listen," he told Sophia. "None of that is real. The only real thing here is you and me right now." "How do you know?" Her voice shook. "How can you tell the difference?" Michael thought about 7 years of convincing himself that nothing impossible had happened. 7 years of passing evaluations and filing reports and staying quiet about the things he'd seen. 7 years of becoming the ranger who looked too hard and saw things that weren't there. "Because the real things hurt," he said. "The real things are afraid. The real things want to go home." He pulled Sophia to her feet, supporting her weight against his shoulder. The forest pressed in from all sides, and from the darkness between trees he saw them. All the stolen faces, all the copied voices, all the impressions of missing persons that had been used to lure others deep into the woods. They flickered like corrupted video, watching with expressions that cycled through every human emotion without understanding any of them. Michael's radio crackled one final time. This time, the voice that came through was his own, not recorded, not distorted. His voice from right now, speaking words he hadn't said yet. "I'm not staying. You don't get to keep her. You don't get to keep any of us." The words came out of his mouth a second later, overlapping with the radio transmission. The synchronization was perfect. Impossible. Michael had heard his own voice before the thought had fully formed. The forest screamed. Not with sound exactly, with something deeper. A vibration that Michael felt in his teeth and bones and the spaces between his thoughts. The mist withdrew suddenly, retreating like a living thing that had been struck. The stolen faces flickered more rapidly, losing cohesion, becoming static and shadow. "Move," Michael commanded, and he and Sophia stumbled forward together. The forest tried to confuse them, tried to loop them back, tried to make every tree look the same, every path circular, every direction identical. But Michael had spent 12 years in these woods. He knew the angle of the evening light. He knew the sound of the river in the distance. He knew the shape of mountains against the sky. More importantly, he knew what was real and what wasn't. And sometimes, that was enough. They broke onto the main trail 40 minutes later, just as full darkness fell, and Michael's emergency beacon finally connected with the Search Coordination Center. Within an hour, rescue teams arrived with lights and medical equipment and questions that Michael knew better than to answer completely. Sophia was airlifted to Port Angeles Medical Center with severe hypothermia and dehydration. She would recover physically within days. The psychological scars would take longer, if they healed at all. Michael knew that from experience. He filed his report carefully. Lost hiker, disoriented by dense forest and poor visibility, found in state of extreme distress, successfully extracted. Recommended follow-up, standard post-rescue counseling. He left out the parts that mattered. 3 days later, Michael returned to the Hoh rainforest alone. Not on duty. Not with authorization. He followed his GPS coordinates to the hollow where he'd found Sophia, but the landscape had changed. The enormous spruce was still there, but the root hollow was gone, filled in. Or maybe never existed the way he remembered it. In his pocket, he carried something he'd found in Sophia's campsite during the evidence collection. A small digital voice recorder that she'd brought for her biology research. The investigators had reviewed it and found nothing but bird calls and stream sounds. But Michael had listened more carefully. 14 hours before Sophia had been reported missing, her recorder had picked up something else. Faint, barely audible beneath the natural forest ambience. A voice calling her name, in her own voice. Michael dug a small hole at the base of the ancient spruce and buried the recorder deep. Some evidence was better left unfound. Some truths weren't meant for official reports. He placed his hand against the massive trunk, feeling the rough bark and the sense of vast, patient life contained within. The tree had stood here for hundreds of years before the park was established. It would stand here for hundreds more. "I know you're still here," Michael said quietly. "I know what you do. I know what you've taken." The forest was silent. Not the expectant silence of 3 days ago, but something closer to acknowledgement. "I can't stop you. I probably can't even understand you, but I remember. And I'll keep remembering. And I'll keep finding them when I can." Michael left his hand on the bark for another moment, then turned and walked back toward civilization. His radio worked perfectly now. His GPS showed clear signal. The mist had returned to normal fog, following natural air currents through the canopy. But as he reached the trailhead, his radio crackled once more. Just static. Just white noise. Except buried in the noise, if you listened carefully enough, were voices. Dozens of voices. Hundreds, maybe. All calling out for help that would never arrive. Michael adjusted his radio to a clear channel and walked back to his truck. He had reports to file and protocols to follow. He had a reputation to maintain as the ranger who saw things that weren't there and looked for people long after everyone else had given up. It was a reputation he could live with. Behind him, in the depths of the Hoh rainforest, the ancient trees stood silent and patient, waiting for the next person who would stray from the trail, the next voice to copy, the next image to steal. The forest remembered. It always remembered. And so did Michael Carson. Thank you for reading until the end. If you enjoyed this narrative, please consider following for more immersive stories. What's your interpretation of what Michael truly encountered in the Hoh rainforest? I'd love to read your theories in the comments. The phone call came at 2:47 a.m., shattering the silence of Chris Hayes' ranger station like a stone through glass. "Please," the woman's voice fractured around the word. "My daughter, Lauren, she's been missing since yesterday morning. The local police, they say they're doing everything, but it's been 26 hours and I can feel it. I can feel something's wrong. You have to understand. Chris pressed the phone tighter to his ear, already pulling on his boots with his free hand. Outside, March rain hammered the station's metal roof in a relentless rhythm. Ma'am, I need you to slow down. Tell me where she was last seen. The Hoh River Trail. She was doing photography for her senior project. She texted me at 7:15 a.m. that she was going in. Nothing since. A sob broke through. She's only 19, she's all I have. Chris's pen stilled above the incident report. 19. The same age Meredith had been. His jaw tightened. I'll find her, Mrs. Mitchell. I'm heading out now. After he hung up, Chris sat in the darkness of the station listening to the rain. 5 years since the incident at Mount Rainier. 5 years since he'd held Meredith Kwan's body, hypothermic and unconscious, while he radioed for evacuation. 5 years since she'd opened her eyes in the hospital and whispered about the woman in the fog who'd called her name in her mother's voice, who'd led her miles off trail into the glacial valleys. The psychiatrist said Meredith had experienced a hypoxic hallucination. The hospital said she'd make a full recovery. But Chris had seen something in her eyes that last time he visited, a haunted recognition, as if she'd glimpsed something that couldn't be unseen. He'd requested transfer to Olympic National Park 3 months later. Different mountains, different forests, different shadows. Chris grabbed his pack, methodically checking supplies in the harsh fluorescent light. First aid kit, emergency bivy, water purification tablets, headlamp with fresh batteries, the good ones, Duracells, not the cheap off-brand that died after 3 hours. His Garmin GPS, though he knew from experience that the canopy in the Hoh would scatter the satellite signal like light through a prism. Paper map, compass, whistle, his service radio, though the temperate rainforest swallowed transmission the way the moss swallowed sound. By 3:30 a.m., he was driving the 14 miles of gravel road to the Hoh Rainforest trailhead, windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the downpour. The ranger truck's headlights carved a tunnel through absolute darkness, catching the ghostly shapes of Sitka spruce trunks wide as cars. The Olympics received 12 feet of rain annually. In March, it felt like all 12 feet fell at once. The parking lot held only 2 vehicles, Lauren's silver Honda Civic and a moss-covered pickup that looked abandoned. Chris swept his mag light across the Honda's interior, camera bag visible on the back seat, purse tucked under the passenger seat, keys in the ignition. She'd meant to come back quickly. Chris studied the trailhead, where the Hoh River Trail disappeared into a tunnel of green so dense it seemed solid. Even in daylight, the forest here existed in permanent twilight. At 4 a.m. it was a wall of black punctured only by his flashlight beam. The beam caught something pale on the trail marker, a strip of yellow fabric tied to the signpost. Fresh, not weathered. Chris's radio crackled to life. "Hayes, this is dispatch, you copy?" He unclipped it from his belt. "Copy, Sarah. Just got a call from search and rescue coordinator. They can't mobilize a team until first light. Weather's too bad for helo recon. Sheriff's Department is asking you to hold position until 600. Chris looked at the trail, at the yellow fabric that might have been torn from Lauren Mitchell's jacket. At his watch, 3:47 a.m., 2 hours until dawn, 28 hours since Lauren had last been heard from. "Negative," he said, "I'm going in." Static hissed. Then, "Chris, you can't do this alone. I'm not leaving her out there for another 2 hours. Not in this rain." A long pause. "Be careful. And Hayes, keep your radio on." The forest swallowed him within 50 feet of the trailhead. The sound dampened first, a phenomenon unique to the Hoh rainforest. Scientists said the massive trees and dense moss absorbed noise, creating one of the quietest places in the continental United States. Chris had read the studies. He knew the physics. But knowledge didn't change the fact that his footsteps seemed to vanish the moment they occurred, eaten by a silence so profound it pressed against his eardrums like water pressure. His headlamp beam revealed a world removed from time. Big leaf maples writhed overhead, their branches thick with club moss that hung in curtains 15 feet long. Nurse logs, fallen giants decomposing into soil, sprouted forests of their own, western hemlock saplings, sword ferns, huckleberry bushes. Everything was wet. Everything was green. Everything was watching. Chris pushed the thought away. Just trees. Just moss. Just a forest. Lauren! His voice barely traveled 10 feet before the moss devoured it. Lauren Mitchell. He paused, listening. Rain dripped from 1,000 surfaces. The Hoh River murmured in the distance, glacier-fed and gray with sediment. Nothing else. Chris moved deeper, sweeping his light across the trail. The Hoh River Trail was well maintained, a wide path of packed earth and gravel that followed the river for 17 miles into the heart of the Olympics, popular with tourists in summer. Nearly deserted in March, at the half-mile mark, he found her tripod. It stood in the middle of the trail, perfectly positioned to capture the bridge over Mineral Creek. The legs were splayed wide and stable, no camera attached. Chris knelt, examining the ground. Footprints in the mud, already half dissolved by rain. Small, tennis shoes, leading off trail to the north, toward the sound of the river. Lauren, he called again, louder. The forest absorbed his voice like a sponge. Chris hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to stay on the trail. The Hoh River carved steep canyons through this terrain. The vegetation off-trail grew so dense, you could walk past someone lying injured 5 feet away and never see them. But those footprints led somewhere. Someone had walked that direction. He marked the tripod's location on his GPS, though the device showed only 2 satellite bars, position accuracy plus or minus 60 feet, and pushed into the underbrush. The change was immediate. On trail, the forest maintained an illusion of order. Off trail, it revealed its true nature: chaotic, primal, indifferent to human passage. Devil's Club grew in thorny thickets. Fallen logs created barriers head high. The ground became a maze of hidden holes where roots had rotted away. Chris's progress slowed to a crawl. The footprints continued, visible as pressed moss and disturbed leaf litter. Whoever made them had been moving fast. Too fast for this terrain, running from something or toward it. Lauren, if you can hear me, call out. Your mother sent me to find you. The rain intensified, drumming against the canopy high above. Cold water ran down Chris's neck despite his rain jacket. March in the Olympics hovered just above freezing. Hypothermia weather. 30 hours in this, and even a healthy person. His radio crackled. Yes, you there? Hayes. Static ate the rest. Sarah, you're breaking up. Say again. Trail cam, tours, ething. More static, then silence. Sarah? Dispatch? Nothing. The canopy had finally cut him off. Chris checked his position. The GPS showed him 0.3 miles from the trail, though the map was now a vague sketch with a pulsing blue dot that might have been his location or might have been fantasy. The river sounded closer, its voice rising from a murmur to a steady rush. Then he heard it. Chris. His name spoken softly from somewhere ahead. Female voice. Young. Lauren? Is that you? Chris, I'm so cold. He pushed forward, brambles catching at his jacket. Keep talking. I'm coming to you. I can't feel my hands anymore. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Ahead, behind, above. Chris's light swept across vertical curtains of moss, finding nothing but green and shadow. The acoustic properties of the forest, he told himself. Sound reflecting off the canopy, the river, the canyon walls. Basic physics. Lauren, stay where you are. I'm a ranger. I'm here to help you. Why did you leave me, Chris? He froze. That wasn't Lauren's voice. That was, you promised you'd find me. The voice changed pitch, became younger. Meredith's voice. You promised you wouldn't let her take me. Chris's breath came short and sharp. The headlamp beam shook in his hand. Not real. Stress response. Auditory hallucination triggered by guilt and exhaustion. He'd been in therapy. He knew the signs. "Not real," he said aloud. "You're not real. I'm so cold, Chris, why won't you help me? Stop it." His voice cracked. The forest went silent. Even the rain seemed to pause. Then, "Help me, please. I'm at the river." Lauren's voice again, or something wearing it. Chris's hands trembled as he pulled out his compass. The needle spun lazily, unable to settle on a direction. He tapped the casing. The needle kept spinning. Magnetic interference. Mineral deposits in the rocks. There were dozens of rational explanations. He chose a direction and moved. The river appeared suddenly, a roiling mass of glacier melt churning over boulders the size of cars. The hoe ran fast and cold and merciless. 20 feet across here, maybe 4 feet deep in the center channel. Impossible to ford safely. On the opposite bank, caught in the beam of his headlamp, a figure in a yellow jacket. "Lauren!" The figure didn't move. Stood perfectly still, facing away from him. "Lauren, it's Ranger Hayes. Your mother sent me." The figure's head tilted as if considering. Then it turned. The face wasn't human. Wasn't anything. Just a blur, a suggestion of features that Chris's eyes refused to focus on. And when it opened its mouth, Lauren's voice emerged. "Come help me, Chris. The water isn't that deep." Every nerve in Chris's body screamed danger. He took a step back. The thing wearing Lauren's voice smiled. He felt it smile rather than saw it. "You left Meredith. You'll leave me too." "Where's Lauren?" Chris's voice came out steady, surprising him. "Where's the real Lauren Mitchell?" "She's everywhere." The voice multiplied, became 10 voices, 20, speaking in unison. "She's in the water. She's in the moss. She's in you." The figure stepped off the bank and into the river. The current should have swept it away immediately. Instead, it walked across the surface, water parting around its feet. Chris ran. If this story is capturing your attention, follow for more quality content. What would you do in Christopher's situation? Share your thoughts. Branches whipped his face. His feet found holes, roots, rocks. He fell twice, scrambled up, kept moving. Behind him, he heard nothing. No pursuit, no footsteps, just the terrible silence of the forest. And underneath it, a sound like breathing. His headlamp flickered. Died. Came back. The beam painted wild shadows across the moss-draped trees. Think. He needed to think. Get back to the trail. Call for backup when his radio worked again. This was beyond his training, beyond rational explanation, beyond Chris. His mother's voice. Impossible. She died 3 years ago. Cancer. "Christopher, honey, why did you stop visiting me?" He pressed his hands over his ears. Didn't help. The voice came from inside his skull. "I was so sick, so alone. You stopped coming." "I was there," he whispered. "I was there every day." "Liar." The voice turned venomous. "You abandoned me. Just like you abandoned Meredith. Just like you'll abandon Lauren." Chris's foot caught and he went down hard, chin cracking against a log. Blood filled his mouth. He lay there, gasping, while the forest pressed down on him like a living thing. His headlamp illuminated a patch of moss 6 inches from his face. As he watched, the moss began to move, a slow, writhing motion, as if it were breathing, or as if something beneath it were trying to push through. He scrambled backward and his hand landed on something cold and firm. Flesh. Chris jerked away, his light swinging wildly, and found himself staring at Lauren Mitchell. She lay against a nurse log, her yellow jacket torn and muddy. Her eyes were closed. Her skin was pale as paper, but her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. "Lauren?" He reached for her, then stopped. The entity could mimic appearances, could wear any face, but this close he could see details. The University of Washington lanyard around her neck, the small scar on her chin, the way her right hand curled in the same position as in the photo Mrs. Mitchell had texted him, a photo he'd only glanced at in the darkness of his truck. This was her. This was real. Chris checked her pulse. weak but present. Her skin was ice cold, advanced hypothermia. He needed to get her warm, get her moving. He pulled the emergency bivvy from his pack, wrapped it around her, activated the chemical heat pack and tucked it against her core. Lauren, can you hear me? Her eyelids fluttered, opened. Her eyes focused on his face with an expression of such profound relief that Chris felt something break inside his chest. You came, she whispered. She said no one would come. Who said that? The woman. She looked like my mom at first. Then she looked like... Lauren's eyes went distant. She kept changing, kept calling me deeper into the forest. I knew I shouldn't follow, I knew. But her voice was so familiar and I just wanted to believe. Her breath hitched. How long have I been out here? 30 hours. Your mom's worried sick. Tears spilled down Lauren's cheeks. I couldn't find my way back. The trail disappeared. Every time I thought I was going the right direction, I'd end up somewhere else. And the voices kept getting closer. Chris helped her sit up. She was shaking violently. A good sign, actually. When hypothermia patients stopped shivering, that's when you worried. Chris. Lauren's grip on his arm tightened. She's still here. I can feel her. I know. He did know. The air around them felt thick, expectant. We need to move. Can you walk? She nodded, though when he helped her stand, her legs nearly buckled. Chris caught her, took most of her weight. They started moving, Chris choosing direction by instinct and desperation, praying it was toward the trail. The forest had become a maze, trees he didn't remember passing, clearings that shouldn't exist. The river's voice came from 3 directions at once. His compass still spun uselessly. Chris. Lauren's voice barely audible. What is she? I don't know. Yes, you do. He did. He'd known since Meredith Kwan had opened her eyes in that hospital bed and told him about the woman in the fog. He'd known since his research had led him to local legends, stories the old-timers shared about the forest's hunger, about something that lived in the deepest parts of the Olympics, something that fed on the lost and the lonely, something that wore familiar faces and spoke in trusted voices. The Kino had a word for it, Kalamone, the deceiver. The anthropologists who studied the tribe's oral histories dismissed it as cautionary mythology. Chris had dismissed it too. She feeds on isolation, he said quietly. On our need to hear familiar voices in the dark. She gets stronger the more we listen. How do you know? Because I almost let her take someone 5 years ago. Lauren was quiet for a moment. Then, did you save them? Yes. Then you'll save us. Such simple faith. Chris wished he shared it. They stumbled through the darkness. Chris's watch read 5:23 a.m. Dawn was close, but dawn in the Ho meant the forest changing from black to gray, nothing more. No dramatic sunrise, no golden light. Just a gradual lessening of absolute darkness. Chris? Lauren's voice was fading. I'm so tired. Stay with me, we're almost there. He had no idea if that was true. My mom must think I'm dead. Your mom knows you're a fighter. I want to sleep. No sleeping. Tell me about your photography. What were you shooting? Nurse logs. Her words slurred. The way new life grows from death. Decomposition and renewal. My professor said it was trite. Cliché. Sounds beautiful to me. You're just saying that. No, I mean it. And he did. The nurse logs of the Ho, massive fallen trees that became foundations for entire ecosystems, were miracles of transformation. Death feeding life. Endings becoming beginnings. There. Lauren's hand shot out. Ahead, through the trees. A straight line. Unnatural. Man-made. The trail. Chris's legs found new strength. They pushed forward, breaking through the last barrier of undergrowth onto the packed earth of the Ho River Trail. The relief was so intense it felt physical, as if a weight had lifted from his shoulders. His radio crackled. Ah yes. Chris Hayes, do you copy? He fumbled for the device. This is Hayes. I have Lauren Mitchell. She's alive but hypothermic. We're on the Ho River Trail, approximately. He checked his GPS. 3 satellites now. 1, 2 miles in from the trailhead. Copy that. SAR team is staging at the parking lot. Medical en route. ETA 15 minutes. Can you walk her out? Chris looked at Lauren. She managed a weak smile. I can walk. Affirmative. We're heading your way. They started down the trail. Each step felt like a small victory. The forest began to lighten. Still dim, still twilight, but no longer the absolute darkness that had surrounded them. Birds started calling. A Pacific wren's cascading song. A Stellar's jay's harsh cry. Normal sounds. Real sounds. Chris. He looked at Lauren. She was staring back the way they'd come. At the edge of the trail, where forest met path, a figure stood among the trees. Tall, indistinct, watching. Don't look at it, Chris said. Keep walking. She's angry. She can't follow us onto the trail. Not now. Not in the light. How do you know? Because if she could, she would have already. They kept walking. The figure didn't follow, but Chris felt its attention like a physical touch between his shoulder blades. He forced himself to face forward, to focus on each step, on supporting Lauren's weight, on the sound of the river to their left, the real river, its voice steady and unchanging. By the time they reached the parking lot, the SAR team was pulling in, 2 trucks and an ambulance. Paramedics swarmed Lauren, wrapping her in heat-reflective blankets, checking vitals, loading her onto a stretcher. Mrs. Mitchell burst from a sedan, sobbing, reaching for her daughter. Chris stood apart watching the reunion. His legs shook, his hands shook. The adrenaline crash hit him all at once and he sat down hard on the parking lot's gravel. Sarah from dispatch appeared beside him, holding out a thermos of coffee. You look like hell. Feel worse. Lauren's going to be fine. Moderate hypothermia. No frostbite. You got to her in time. Chris nodded. He couldn't seem to make his mouth form words. Chris, Sarah's voice went quiet. What happened out there? He looked at her normal, concerned human face, at the parking lot full of rangers and paramedics and emergency vehicles, at the forest beyond, already retreating into its inscrutable stillness. Got turned around in the dark, he said. Forest played tricks on me. Lauren was hypothermic, probably hallucinating. We made it out. Sarah studied him. She'd worked dispatch long enough to know when someone was lying. If you say so, I say so. She squeezed his shoulder and walked away. Chris sat in the gravel, drinking coffee, watching the ambulance pull away with Lauren Mitchell inside. She'd live. She'd go home to her mother. She'd finish her senior project, maybe on a different topic. She'd move on with her life. And he'd go back into the forest, because that's what rangers did. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Thank you for bringing my daughter home. Karen Mitchell. Chris typed a response. Just doing my job. Take care of her. He looked up at the trailhead, where the Ho River Trail disappeared into green shadow. Nothing moved there. Nothing watched. The forest was just a forest again, moss and ferns and ancient trees. But he knew better. In his pocket, his compass still spun. Thank you for reading to the end. If you enjoyed this narrative, consider following for more engaging stories. What's your interpretation of what happened in the Olympic forest? I'd love to read your theories in the comments.